In the name of the one, holy and undivided Trinity. Amen. So there's a poor man who's very devout, who's under great financial strain. He goes to church and he prays diligently, seriously, to win the lottery. And he leaves church and goes home, waits a week, does not win the lottery. He returns to church the following Sunday, again, goes down on his knees and begs, just outright begs God that he might win the lottery. It would solve so much for him. It would help his family. He would be eternally grateful. He goes home, waits the week, no win. This continues for several more weeks until one Sunday he gets so fed up that he cries out in his distress, "Why, God? Why can't I win the lottery? What do I have to do?" And suddenly, a voice comes down to him from heaven. My son, buy a ticket." Given the story about the fig tree that Jesus tells today, I think Jesus might have appreciated this joke. "The fig tree won't produce," the man complains. My son, have you tried fertilizing it? Help a deity out here." There might not be a better snippet in the scriptures that illustrates us in partnership with God. It tells us so explicitly that there is something sacred and correct and built into the system about us and God working in concert. That God gives us this world and we work with it to make God's will happen. There are theologies out there that hold that this world is something different than that this world is essentially a limp plaything that God runs current through, that we're dolls that God is moving around in a giant playhouse. People will talk about confidence in this God as omnipotent and in charge and in control, and that nothing happens without this God meaning for it to happen. This is God as world's most obsessive engineer. This is a mechanical world where there are no accidents. But aren't there? Aren't there accidents? In the first part of today's reading, Jesus tells of two unfortunate groups of souls. One group whose blood Pilate mingled with his bloody Roman sacrifices, which is pretty bad as doing bad stuff goes. And did they deserve it? Were they worse than everyone else? No, Jesus says. They were just average bad. The people who the tower fell on, were they worse than everyone else? No, Jesus says. They were the same. Some bad, some good, they just got hit. But, he says, if you don't turn your lives around while you still have a chance, you're going to perish just like them. And it will be your own darn fault. I think this draws a good line for us. That there are consequences to what we do. Fertilizing a tree makes it more likely that that tree will produce fruit. That's a consequence, and a material one. But this also works on a larger scale. Cheating on someone is likely to make them feel betrayed, and they'll stop trusting you. Murdering someone else's child will make someone angry at you, generally. There are consequences to our actions. Now, consequences are not the same thing as punishment. Consequences are not the same thing as punishment. I feel like that's not always clear in how Christians talk about sin. Often there's a reflexive, compulsive need for a good, real, true Christian to never have any bad feelings about anyone after someone hurts them. And that we forget that those feelings are real, live, and true consequences of having violence happen to one's person. They're spoken sometimes as punishment, as if the victim is doing something cruel to the perpetrator by refusing to forgive or holding on to anger. This kind of mindset, this kind of tunnel vision around the behavior of victims rather than the behavior of perpetrators leads us to things like wondering obsessively about why a woman who is being beaten stays, rather than wondering why someone beats her. And this bit of tunnel vision, I think, is peculiar to late modern Christianity, and I wonder about it, if it's a bug or a feature. We also are simply pattern-seeking animals. We want the world to work properly. We want there to be an easy answer for why someone suffered. He had a criminal record. That's why the police shot him. I wasn't very nice to my first wife. I deserve this cancer. But it doesn't work that way. At least not how Jesus tells it. In both of these cases, Jesus says that that way of imagining a mechanistic this for that is not real. He acknowledges that behavior can be sinful and evil and destructive, both self-destructive and destructive of the precious network of relationships that make up a band of friends, or a society, or a city, or a nation, or a whole world. Consequences exist. They involve humans interacting with the world that God has set up, and they tend to be complicated and messy like us. Punishment as math, as a precise calculus, or God having a calculator up in the sky, trying to figure out what single thing we deserve for our badness. That is a different story, and God is not in it. There's something about admitting that our actions have consequences that is good for us spiritually. This is one of the reasons that we forefront the confession during Lent, and why many choose to come in for the sacrament of confession or reconciliation during the season of Lent. It is a way, if you'll forgive me the metaphor, of stirring up the soil around the tree of our persons, of enriching it with prayer and honesty and real intention to change. I love meeting with people for confession during Lent, but it might also be more appropriate for you to practice on your own, daily, searching your day for times you were acting out of something that wasn't holy, or that wasn't your own best self. That process has borne good fruit in my life, so I suggest it to you. But if not, also no big deal. You can cut it down. But the call this week, I think, hidden in this gospel reading, is to try for honesty about our own impact on our world, and whether or not how we spend our time and our money and our thoughts reflects our truest values, the things we care most about. This week in Lent, the gospel wants our bluntness and our candor. It is that that brings us back to that very proper, very sacred circle where we are working in concert with God, where the best and the worst and the truest things about ourselves are laid bare, and we work on it together.